So, relationships. Very important, especially in this time of COVID. We get to notice how important our relationships are, the ones we're with and the ones we're without. Yes, and databases, relationships are also very important because it's kind of the reason for databases. If we didn't have relationships, we could just have all the data in single tables. That would be totally fine. We would just get the data from a table and read it in and use it. But no, the because we can't have duplications and we have different cardinality. We have different numbers of things. Like, for example, a person has multiple appointments. We can't have them both in the same table because you're going to have one person and many appointments. You can't do that. So you need to have them in separate tables. And so because you have to have them in separate tables, you need to have a relationship between the tables to keep them connected up together. Uh, and Here we use the term files. It should be between tables, really. Uh, uh, and and uh, and relationships. Why did I say the word files here? They allow you to look up between tables to show how the tables are linked to each other. So and you can have three different types of relationships: general types, so one to one, one to many, and many to many. Now, one to one relationships are fairly rare, and why is that? Because if you have a one to one relationship, you actually don't need a separate table. You could just put them all in the same table because there's one of these and one of these. So why not just put all the data together? Sometimes you don't want to put it together. For example, you'll have one patient and one something in a one patient, one say patient administration system record and one diagnostic administration system record. Well, you don't want to put them together because they're in different types of things. So we'll just join them together. But that's a one-to-one relationship. One-to-many relationships are the most common. They're the shiz. There's so many one-to-many relationships, and we'll have a big play with them. And for example, one person, many appointments. One person, many tests. One person, many names. For example, down here, a patient um, has many names. And for example, and many to many is also, it's probably more common than one to one, but and been very useful too. So an example of many to many relationship is a person and a doctor. So is treated by. So a doctor treats many people. So a single doctor can treat many people, and a single person can be treated by many doctors. So many to many relationship, and that's quite useful as well. You'll see a lot more of those in the next few months. So just a little quick glance over relationships. Um, we have these things called the entity relationship diagram. Entity being the tables, relationship being the line between the tables. And here's an example of one. A hospital has many patients. We need to track the patient's physical files and any pseudonyms they have. For each patient, we need to know their name, date of birth, and address. So I am going to give you so many of these scenarios. You're going to get really good at turning these scenarios into entity relationship diagrams. It will be on the exam. So how does it work? How a patient has, so there's many patients, so we need a table for patients. We don't need a table for a hospital because there's only one of them, and we only want a table for things where there's a lot of them. We have a patient has physical files. So for a single patient, how many files are there? Many. For a single file, how many patients are there? One for a single file. So it's a one-to-many relationship. And any pseudonyms they have. For a single patient, how many pseudonyms do they have? Many. Those patients. For a single pseudonym, how many patients do they have? Well, they are attached to one patient. So because we don't want to have a generic pseudonym database, so each person can have their own particular unique pseudonym. And then these are attributes. Each patient needs to know their name, date of birth, and address. So how we would do that, we would have a patient has got this information attached to them. Unique ID is the primary key. File is the record for their their particular file, their primary key is unique ID, record type. So unique ID is the patient ID. I guess we should probably call that patient ID. Because that makes a lot more sense. And so the patient ID is part of the primary key of this one. The primary key are in bold. So the patient ID, those four things identify that file, and then the file location tells you where that physical file is. These are the three things that identify this thing: the patient ID, and then their two surname and given name, and what type of. So these are attributes of that thing. And so let's give an example of how you would take that ER diagram and put data in it. For example, Mary Smith, that's the in the people table, we would give her given name as Mary Elizabeth Smith, and where they live, and residential street address. So that's the data that would go into that. That would be one line of data in the Mary Smith table. How would we insert all this data into the database? Well, this is their main record, this one, and their maiden name was so Mary Lancaster would be the data that goes in there. Pseudonym data, also called Molly, also pseudonym data. These are the UR records. So there's a few records of that. So the UR records are those. That's how you would store the UR records. These are how you would store the other records. Oh, I see. We've put Molly Smith in the patient file table, and the other records are the other names are here because she likes to be called Molly. Yeah. So and also there's sort of another standard way of looking at things. It's called reference files. So how would you go and look up where the information about a certain type of record? So for example, this what do we call it? We call this the record type. There's a certain set of information about a record type that we want to keep track of, and we don't want to put it into every place that we store a file. We just want to keep track of the fact that that's a record type UR. We want to keep track of that. And then, so where are we going to store all the information about UR records? Well, we're going to store it in here. So given the fact that we've got a UR type record, a UR type record, these are the types of information that we're going to store about the UR type record. And that's how databases grow. You have information about patients, and then information about the information about patients, and that all that information is stored for each one of the UR type records. So this is a many-to-one relationship where we've got, for a single file, we've got one record type, but that record type applies to many files. And I think I'll just stop there.